Even with the everyday cooking, there is an element of that. I wouldn't say it's ceremonial, but there's the offering element where we offer a little bit of everything that we cook back to the higher gods, I guess you could say, and the elementals.
Hi, I'm Olivia Cummings, and on this podcast, I'd like to introduce you to the people who inspire me in my life and work as a jeweler, designer, and the founder of Cleopatra's Bling. Food has been a vital avenue into connection for me. As I moved to different cities all around the world through my 20s, I got to know friends and found family through sharing food, teaching them my favourite recipes and learning their local traditions. From becoming perhaps overly addicted to fresh sardines in Naples to eating piping hot künefe in Istanbul, my memories of different places are intricately tied to the food culture there. My guest, Çok Maya Kertiasa, is the author, illustrator and stylist of Paon, Real Balinese Cooking. We spoke about traditional Balinese recipes, zero waste cooking, and what we both love about Bali. Cleopatra's Bling acknowledges the Wurundjeri people as the traditional custodians of the country where we work and their continuing connections to land, waters and culture. We pay our respects to their elders and all Kulin Nations people, past, present and future.
Thank you for being on the podcast. We're sitting in your stunning garden in Ubud. I don't know if this will come through on the audio, but there's lots of sounds of birds and water running, and the air is thick and I'm loving it. My hair is very curly today. Thanks to Bali. Did you want to just maybe give us a little rundown of what you do in Bali and maybe what led you to this career change?
Yeah, well, I do quite a few things, but I'll start from the beginning. So I was a writer for many years. I was working in magazines. I worked at Gourmet Traveller in Sydney for a few years, and then I kind of branched off, had a baby, and moved to Bali, where I was doing, freelance writing and kind of just adjusting to having a child and working and things like that. But my background was very much writing about food. That's what I always loved doing. And then COVID happened, and I was doing a little bit of freelancing at the time, and then all of that dried up. And I was working at the time with Wayan Kresnayasa, who is the co-author of Paon. And so we'd met a few years before, and, I was really impressed by his cooking and his work, and it was really nice to meet someone who also had the same kind of drive to share Balinese cooking with the rest of the world, and even share it more within the island itself, because as you mentioned, sometimes you can come here and not really know how to connect with the traditional food. So when COVID happened and we both had a little bit of extra time on our hands, we sort of sat down and decided to do a book about Balinese food, because we had the time, but also because, Bali was really struggling at that time economically. A lot of the island is centered around tourism, and so we thought, what can we give back to the island in a sense? And we both care a lot about food. Wayan's a really, really wonderful cook, and I'm a food writer. However, I had been learning to cook from my grandmother, my Balinese grandmother. And so we had all these recipes that, we wanted to get out in the world. And so during COVID, sort of end of 2020 until middle of 2022, we were working on Paon. And that was a really wonderful thing to do during that time. And, you know, now when I look back, I think, wow, if we'd tried to take this project on in any other time, for example now, it would be pretty much impossible.
Yeah, it's a big undertaking.
A really big one, because since, you know, the world reopened, it's just been full on, and I've gone from being a writer to being an illustrator, helping run a hotel, and also helping run a holistic health brand. So,
Wow. Busy.
yeah, so they're all very different things, but, you know, they're all very special, and I enjoy doing them all.
Amazing. What I really loved about like my introduction to your book was obviously when I just opened it and started reading your both of your takes on Balinese cooking and why you wanted to do this book, and the spiritual and holistic connection to the paon and like the positioning of that within the house, which I really loved, and I think something that maybe the West, well, is completely void of really, because, you know, we don't think about the feng shui of the kitchen within the house or what that represents, and it's not really seen as a hearth in the same way that it feels in Bali or a lot of sort of, you know, really ancient cultures. Did you have that growing up, or did you feel that was sort of introduced in your older years as you came back to your roots?
Well, I've been back and forth between Australia and Bali my whole life. So when I was growing up, when I was younger, I did have the paon always here in Ubud. However, I really connected with it after I'd been living in Australia for a long time without that type of kitchen and that kind of connection with the kitchen. And that's when I grew to really appreciate it. And when I came back, I became almost obsessed with it. But yeah, it was that sort of like real connection with the elements and the actual sort of philosophy behind everything in the kitchen that really nourished me after having lived in Australia for, you know, more than 10 years and not had that level of connection with it. Which isn't to say I didn't have a lovely time cooking in my kitchen in Australia and things like that. You know, actually, my Australian grandmother and her kitchen was such a big part of why I grew to love food and cooking initially. But yeah, coming back here and, you know, being one with the fire and the smoke and just really having a very sensory experience with the food in the kitchen, I think that was a very big driver for me to write about Balinese cooking and to share it, because, you know, as much as the book is a book about the cuisine or culinary traditions of Bali, it has a very universal message about returning the soul into cooking.
Yeah.
Which you can actually learn not only from this culture but from other, you know, traditional cultures that have preserved these very special ways of connecting with food. So
yeah, I feel like maybe that sort of, it almost feels like a systemic and spiritual disconnection, and you see it in Australia with, you know, Uber Eats and like the sort of the quick relief and like the way that people cook something maybe comforting or but not necessarily nourishing or thought about. And I think like what I've noticed in Australia is that it's unusual, especially people of our age, to like, you know, this generation, to be invested from, you know, from in A to Z cooking, kind of like, you know, if you have a risotto, to make your broth as well, like, you know, all of those elements that make the meal just taste so much better but also feel better.
yeah.
Like the energy of the food. And I think that's something that even in my, obviously, you know, small knowledge of Bali, being a foreigner here, I do feel that when you eat here and like the people's pride in it, which is why I choose to stay at sort of smaller homestays when I'm here, because you're being fed by mostly the grandma, like where I'm staying at the moment, and she cooked me breakfast this morning, and it just felt so loving. So I think that's really what your book gave me anyway through reading it.
Oh, thank you. That's really nice to hear, because yeah, I mean, it is when we are able to share Balinese home cooking with visitors, it is actually a really special thing, because it's the kind of cuisine that still draws so much like surprise out of people because it's almost hidden,
I agree,
it's like hidden underneath all of the I guess kind of classic Indonesian dishes that are easy to find outside of home kitchens, or Italian food, or Japanese. Like, it's all kind of happening here. But when you do try Balinese food cooked by Balinese people in their homes, it's always really nice to see people's reactions, because also the ingredients are often things that you can't find if you go to the supermarket and things like that.
Like, I was surprised, obviously, like, I knew that ginger was used a lot in Balinese cooking, but how many types of ginger in Bali was so interesting to me. Can you tell us a little bit about certain ingredients that you can only find in Bali?
Yeah, well, I mean, what have we got? I'll talk about what we have just growing here, because to start with, because it's actually, it's so incredible that we have this fertile land here in Bali where we can forage so many ingredients even within a small home garden or even just on the side of the road. So there are things like Javanese long pepper, tabia bun, which has the actual pepper itself, but the leaves can be used as a vegetable. So there are things like that. There are cinnamon tree leaves, which can be used as a vegetable. The bamboo, mbung, is really special, the young bamboo. Also very high in silica, like a really incredible superfood, for lack of a better term. We have the different types of ginger. So there's bangli, which we're actually drinking in this infusion here.
Is that the slightly almost minty aftertaste?
It's more of it's the warmth in this, I would say.
What's the cooler aftertaste in this drink?
Cooler aftertaste would maybe be the vetiver.
Yeah, I think it's the vetiver. So that would, okay. I was getting something slightly minty.
There's quite a lot of ingredients in here. We also have lemongrass in there. There's may also be lemon balm in this blend as well. There's quite a lot. What other ingredients have we got? I mean, there's so many. Just in my grandmother's garden, she's got the young fern tips. She has papaya leaves. The young papaya is also used. We've got, a lot. Blimbing, which is bilimbi leaves, like the little star fruits. So there's quite a lot of vegetables or wild, kind of wild-crafted plants that are unique to Bali. There's even a leaf called bulun baon. And I don't even know what the Indonesian translation of that is.
That's just Balinese?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And I asked and asked and asked in the process of writing the book, and I couldn't find it. People just know it as bulun baon. And that is a leaf that's often used as an aromatic. And it's got a really incredible, almost like zesty flavor that it brings to things, like bubur, which is like a rice porridge. But yeah, these ingredients are all really unique to Bali. And then I'm only talking about Ubud and Gianyar here, but you go to the next kind of regency, and they'll have a completely different set of ingredients that are unique to there. So Tabanan, for example, uses a lot of the kecicang, which is the torch ginger flower, and they'll have that in their sambals and things like that. So that's an hour from here by car.
It's incredible.
And on such a small island, I think that's a really special thing.
Yeah, it is. What I noticed when I did a few cooking classes in Bali, what I've noticed is that the cooking outside creates such a different experience. And I feel like, I don't know if this is just a psychological effect, but the elements create the taste as well.
Yeah.
And I feel I want to recreate this in my apartment in Melbourne, but I'm slightly, worried that it wouldn't taste as good. But, it's kind of like in Napoli, they say that the pizza tastes good because of the water and the air.
Yep.
And it's not just about the flour and, the technique. It's about the environment and the humidity and, in which it's created.
Yeah, well, it's also the smoke, which may cause a bit of an issue in your apartment.
Yeah.
But I think, there's something about...
The coconut husk.
Coconut husk and
Yeah.
also different types of wood. Like some people use coffee wood, some people use rambutan wood, lychee tree wood. All of that, contributes to the flavor.
Yeah.
And then water also, as you said earlier, is a really big one. So here we are really lucky to have a natural spring. And so we cook using natural spring water, so you don't have any kind of other, additives in there that might change the flavor of the dish. And then it's just come directly from the earth, so there really is, you really get a very full and vibrant kind of expression of the landscape when the food is cooked in that way. And I think that's why sometimes, the cuisine is a little bit misunderstood because it does actually just taste so different when it's cooked out in the elements and in that very traditional way.
So I wanted to talk about your book, Paun, and how it offers a deep dive into Balinese culture. Can you sort of give some tips for people who are wanting to cook Balinese food at home outside of Bali? Because I feel like, after listening to this, a lot of people are going to look up your book and hopefully buy it. And for myself included, I'd like to have some of your tips handy for cooking Balinese food outside of the island.
I'll begin with, it isn't always the simplest task, when you're just getting started. And even for me as a Balinese person in Australia, when I first moved there, I rarely cooked Balinese food because I kind of put it in the too hard basket. However, the recipes that we have chosen in the book are, for the most part, recipes that you can replicate at home. The first thing I would say is to start by making the spice paste. Just get in a rhythm of, preparing all the ingredients and learning how to make the spice paste first, because I think people underestimate how complex just that process is in itself. And it's not that it's complicated, it's essentially just preparing your ingredients and chopping them. I mean, it can be exhausting for your arm at first if you're going to do it by hand, which I highly recommend. But yeah, I think that's just, in this age of convenience where we can buy quite a few spice pastes from around the world and just throw them in a pan and you're done. I think allowing yourself the time to really settle into the process of making the basa is a really nice thing to do.
Is basa paste?
Basa is spice paste.
Okay.
And one of my other tips that relates to that is try doing it by hand, because part of the beauty of the Balinese kitchen is the whole rhythm of it all. And it's something I love to wake up early in the morning and hear, people already starting to cook the tuck, 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 tuck,
so
tuck,
nurturing.
the knife.
Yeah.
And it's really it's a meditative thing, if you've got anything on your mind, you can just start tapping away at the spice paste, and it's a process in itself. So I would recommend, finding a nice thick wooden chopping board, using a cleaver and really just doing it that way, as opposed to throwing it all in the blender and doing it like that.
And what about the volcanic rock? Is that what you would use to make your pastes?
Yeah, so we use the mortar and pestle, just to pound the ingredients first. I like the volcanic rock because obviously we're here on a volcanic island, and for me that just makes a lot of sense, and I like the weight of it and etc. However, if you don't have a volcanic rock one, you don't have to beat yourself up. It's fine.
I like the shape of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're really I know it sounds like an obvious statement, but they are conducive to making a good paste.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because they're less sort of rounded.
Yeah.
You know, you can get your arm in there a bit more.
Yeah. No, I think, you know, investing in one of those is a really great idea, because at the end of the day, you know, real Balinese food is a very physical thing to prepare.
Yeah.
So it's nice to get into the physical side of it. And that's what makes it also like such a nice way to connect with other people. Like Balinese people are always happy in the kitchen.
Yeah.
Because there's quite a lot to do. So you have all this time to laugh, talk. It's a really nice social thing. So also cooking Balinese food in good company is another tip that I would have.
Yeah. Also, your book is about zero waste cooking. Is that like a sort of a universal concept in Bali, or do you think that's something that's becoming more important now as we focus on global warming and, you know, the effects of, you know, late capitalism?
Yeah, so, you know, the zero waste concept that we discuss in the book is very much attached to an extremely pure and traditional version of the Balinese kitchen, which unfortunately in these times that we're living in is becoming harder and harder to find.
Yeah.
Even within the traditional kitchens now, you know, you have sometimes these packets of MSG that make it in there. There's a lot of plastic sachets. You know, the whole world as a whole is so reliant on plastic, but here single-use plastics are still quite a big problem.
Yeah.
But maybe even as close as like 30 or 40 years ago in the Balinese kitchen, you would have most things wrapped in banana leaf. Most of the stuff that came into that kitchen could go back into nature.
Right.
And this is also kind of an issue because with plastic, you know, if there's still a mentality that everything can just go back into nature, whether that's into landfill or be burned or whatever, you know, that stuff doesn't go away. So
Yeah.
one of the reasons why I really wanted to highlight that in the book was to remind people of like just how much we don't actually need plastic. If we're still able to grow our own food and forage it and not buy our vegetables wrapped in plastic in the supermarket, then we should be doing that.
Yeah.
And if we can use banana leaf to wrap stuff, then we should be doing that. But the issue is now we have refrigeration, which is obviously a gift in many ways, but you know, previously we wouldn't keep stuff for very long. We'd just cook one meal and that would be it for the day and nothing would be stored. But now with refrigeration and things like that, you know, you get all of this waste kind of happening. And so, yeah, I mean, my grandmother's kitchen is still pretty good in that there's not too much plastic going through there. And in the really kind of old-fashioned model, even the leftover scraps would go to animals. You know, we don't have pigs here, but our dog gets quite a lot of
Yum.
spare
Delicious
food.
treats.
But yeah, I think, you know, one of the reasons, as I said, why we wanted to talk about that is because that's something that we should be really proud of, that we have a model where, you know, you can prepare food almost completely plastic free.
Yeah.
Obviously that's very different in a restaurant or a hotel that's catering to hundreds or thousands of people, but if at home we can try and replicate that as much as possible, I think that's a really good start because the waste issue, maybe it's quite a bit more visible in Bali, but I think it is actually universally a problem. You know,
Definitely.
my way of looking at it is just because you can't see it because it's gone into a color-coded bin doesn't mean that you haven't contributed to a problem that is still happening, you know, that still exists. So the fact that we can see it here is almost like it's good because it can encourage, you know, those of us who would like to make a change to make a change. Yeah. And the kitchen is a really great place to make a change when it comes to plastic and waste.
Yeah, definitely. You're ingesting directly everything you make in the kitchen, and I think people don't realise how important it is until they don't have their health any longer.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that's a really good point. Like, I mean, one of the biggest elements of Bali is the ceremonial side of things.
Yeah.
And how, like, Balinese culture is a beautiful... Well, Balinese culinary culture is such a beautiful mix of sort of ceremonial cooking and then everyday cooking.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about how those sort of two opposite ends of the spectrum interact, and sort of how often you think you would dedicate time to more ceremonial dishes versus everyday?
Yeah. Even with the everyday cooking, there is an element of that. I wouldn't say it's ceremonial, but there's the offering element where we offer a little bit of everything that we cook back to the higher gods, I guess you could say, and the elementals. So that happens every day, which is really lovely. And it's sort of like before you eat something, it becomes an offering back to, we could say, the universe as a whole. And then the ceremonial dishes. So we just celebrated Kuningan a few days ago here. And before that, we had Galungan, and they happen every 6 months, and they're very big ceremonial cooking times. So for those ceremonies, we make lawar, which is kind of like the chopped, it's described as like a chopped salad, but, you know, it's so much more than that. They're these incredible combinations of different plants, different meats. Some of them even have the blood of the animal that was sacrificed to make the dish, and it's mixed with a lot of spices and chopped really finely. It kind of resembles like larb, you know, in consistency. They're very important ceremonial dishes, and even for other ceremonies outside of Galungan and things like that, people will prepare different lawars, which are color-coded, to kind of represent a different deities and directions.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Galungan and Kuningan is quite a busy time for that ceremonial kind of cooking. And then outside of the sort of offering part of it, we also have all of our family gathering together. So people like to cook really special feast foods like betutu. Some people make babi guling and things like that. So that's a really fun and exciting time, and it's kind of, that's a big communal cooking period. And then when we celebrate Saraswati, you know, the goddess of creativity and wisdom, the day after that there's a special yellow rice dish which is in the book. And yeah, that's another one that, you know, isn't kind of consumed all the time, but is cooked specifically for that event. And then, of course, whenever we have weddings or very big ceremonies, people will make baskets of satay. And it's satay lilit, the ceremonial satay that will be taken to people's houses as invitations and things like that. So we have a very busy cultural calendar here in Bali.
Yeah, so many ceremonies.
Yes.
I know that I mean, we obviously have our small studio here, one of them, and there are so many holidays.
Absolutely.
And they, you know, they'll say I'm out of office at a ceremony, which I kind of love.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's unexpected. You wouldn't know that unless you have a direct link with the culture.
Absolutely.
But I think that's great that that's still honoured especially in 2023, when everything's about, you know, a fast-moving sort of, you know, money-making culture. It's really nice that so many days are taken off for ceremony.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, because I was kind of away from it for so long, when I came back, it was really nice to kind of retune my life to the rhythm of something outside of making money, social life, you know, and even like the Gregorian calendar, because we have different calendars here, and they're tuned to, you know, these really pure cycles that happen within the cosmos, really. Like, it's not just
moon cycles and
the sun, and also, you know, the planets. And so you kind of are able to reconnect with the real rhythm of things.
Yeah.
Although I have to say that it can be challenging to combine, like, because what you have in Bali is like the traditional culture, which is still very much alive and thriving, and then there's the kind of contemporary or like the modern world, which is very much happening as well, and there's business and there's...
And probably pushed by tourism as well, if you've got tourists coming here on the Western schedule.
Yes.
You know, that sort of is pretty jarring, I think, the way that those two interact.
Well, I mean, you know, we take time off when we need to attend to our spiritual and also social, cultural lives, but the tourism industry never stops. So you have to kind of, now working within hospitality, I've got a deeper understanding of, you know, just how complex it is to make sure everybody's able to attend their ceremonies, celebrate the special festival times, account for everything in their lives.
Yeah, and that's so fair.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk, obviously, because the people listening, I want to entice them to buy it, but also when they do buy it, I'd love them to know a little bit of the background of each dish and which of the recipes are really close to your heart.
Yeah.
If you could name 3 of the dishes or recipes from the book that, you know, if you had to cook for somebody, which ones you'd go for? Okay,
so the one that is the closest to my heart is called gachok. Mm-hmm. And it's a really beautiful coconutty chicken dish, and it's something that my grandmother used to cook for my grandfather.
Oh.
And it's like when she talks about it, it's like a love letter to him, you know, or a beautiful tribute to him.
I read about their relationship in your book, which I loved. I didn't realise, like, I was sort of not surprised, but I wouldn't have expected that a lot of her cooking came from what he taught her.
Absolutely.
Which is not surprising, but it's like you would expect it to be more of the women's domain, but I found that a lot of men in Bali cook.
A lot of men in Bali
which I love.
It's great.
Yeah.
And it's often at home, it's like either a 50-50, but even within the culture itself, there are a certain methods of cooking that are kind of reserved or delegated to the men, and certain things that are delegated to the women. And for the men, you know, it's the lawar and satay and things like that, which requires, you know, sacrificing an animal, butchering it. Like, it's quite, it's got quite a yang energy to it.
Yeah, very yang.
And then, at home, a lot of it is women, but you'd be surprised how many men actually also enjoy cooking at home.
Yeah.
So, it's funny. People often think that the cooking is, you know, the women's job here, but it's really quite an equal thing. And my grandfather taught my grandmother quite a lot of the recipes that she loves cooking, and gachok is one of them. And it's just such a delicious, you know, like gently spiced, comforting chicken dish. And then
served with steamed rice?
Yeah, you can have it with rice. You know, we often have it as part of a spread with rice, with vegetable, with like the jackfruit as well.
Yeah.
So there's always like something soupy, something meaty, something fresh, like a vegetable that's a bit lighter on the palate. But yeah, the gachok is a really nice thing that you can have on its own as well. You know, it's probably like one of the closest things to a curry, I guess, that you could have in that book. But yeah, during a cold Australian winter night, it would be great.
Beautiful.
And then I would say the urab, which urab is like vegetable dish, timun, which is cucumber. I really like that one because it's really fresh. It's sort of like a salad, but then you have the kind of coconut in there, and you have the deep fried red shallots and garlic, so it's got this delicious like smokiness to it. And what I love about that is that it kind of, for me, represents this like really simple side of Balinese cooking. You know, gachok is like a bit more special occasion, a little bit more involved. Urap timun is very, simple and beautiful, and it's something that we would eat every day here. And I think that's something that's kind of missed when you go into a lot of restaurants, the simple stuff, because we want to showcase all this incredible, like, very involved, complicated ceremonial food, but the home cooking is also something that we shouldn't overlook.
Yeah.
So that one for sure, and there's so many different versions of that I've had in different places around Bali. So you can kind of experiment with how you like to cut the cucumber. Do you want to dice it? Do you want it thinly sliced? Like, you can play around with that. And then Nyoman's rujak. So Nyoman has worked with my family for, 30 years.
Wow.
You know, she looked after me when I was a child, and now she looks after my child.
Oh.
She's a really important part of my life, and I've learned a lot about Balinese cooking from her, particularly when I came back and she just laughed at me and was like, "What are you doing?" You know? So rujak for me is something that it's just one of those incredible foods that is like, you don't know quite what it is. Like, is it sweet? Is it savory? Have you ever tried it before?
I'm not sure.
So it's fruit with like a tamarind dressing, which has chili, and it has terasi,
I don't think
shrimp
I've tried it
paste in
before.
there. So it's really, the dressing is kind of like tangy, sweet, savory, and it has this like really pungent shrimp paste kick, you know, which some people might find challenging at first, but the more you have it, the more addicted you can get to it.
Yeah, I bet.
Well, that's my experience anyway. Yeah, it was something that I really missed when I was in Australia, and I probably could have made it, but the fruits just didn't.
Yeah, it's not the same.
It didn't feel the same for me. In saying that, you can do it with like pineapple. You could use watermelon. We use the bangkwang, which is like hikama. You can use like a lot of experiment with what fruits that you use. But
Would you do it with papaya?
you could, yeah. A young papaya might be better. I personally don't love it so much with papaya. I love it with rambutan. The bangkwang for me is like one of the best ones, because it's really like it's not too soft. Like, it's better with harder fruits.
Yeah.
So that one is a really special one for me, because it's just nostalgic. It reminds me of coming home. It reminds me of coming back to Nyoman, and it's the type of thing that when it's a really hot day and someone brings out a plate of that, everyone's happy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds amazing. So, in terms of sourcing ingredients, what would you say? Would you say you get most things like foraged and then from markets?
Yeah, so here we're really lucky in that we can forage quite a lot of our food. So a lot of the vegetables and fruits we will forage, but for things like garlic, the red shallots, and a few of the spices, we have to buy them at the market.
Yeah.
My grandma and the people who cook in her kitchen usually go to the market in the morning and get everything. They don't get anything at the supermarket. So it's nice that you can still do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. And so in one of the chapters in your book, it's called From the Passar. Can you tell us what a passar is?
Yeah, so pasar means market. And the reason why we wanted to include that is because, you know, there's kind of, I guess you could say, 3 levels of food. So you've got the ceremonial dishes, you have the home cooking, and then there's the food that's at the markets, which is, you know, you could call it street food, I guess, in a sense. But yeah, a lot of that food is actually, you know, cooked in people's homes and then brought to the market that morning. So it kind of is home cooking as well. But There are like really specific things that are kind of attached to market cuisine. So tipat santo, which is the rice cakes with peanut sauce.
I was going to say the rice cakes are amazing.
Yeah, they're really amazing. Different types of satay. You can also get bubur, so like the rice porridge at the markets. So yeah, I mean, the markets are a really wonderful way actually for visitors to familiarize with the food in Bali if you want a really kind of true Balinese experience. Either the morning markets or the night markets, which are quite a lot of fun, are a nice way to do that if you don't have access to a home kitchen. The only thing is that when you're in the markets, you also have, and this isn't necessarily a bad thing, but you have kind of foods from other islands in Indonesia. So, you're not just getting the profile of Bali, but you're getting other parts of the archipelago as well, which is actually a really lovely thing to see it all come together. But I often nowadays recommend that people go to markets because you can kind of taste everything in one place.
I was at one yesterday.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, just the Ubud food market.
Yeah.
But I honestly love going to markets and trying food in foreign countries more than I do really any other kind of shopping. Mm-hmm. I think it just gives you such a good insight into the country more than shopping for items.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the last question I wanted to ask you was for people visiting Bali for the first time or not for the first time who want to branch out and try, Balinese cooking, apart from going to markets, what are sort of some other tips you can give people to access, authentic food here?
Yeah. It's a really good question. And people ask me this often, and I've thought about it. And my grandmother kind of has shone a light on how to access Balinese food, because she loves to tell stories about Bali in the old days, and I often sit and talk with her about it, and she tells me the same stories over and over and over again. And she always tells me about how people used to come to Bali, and it was a different type of visitor back then. They were coming to study gamelan or dance or painting or something. They were coming to really interact with the culture. But they would come to her place to try Balinese food. And it just really reminded me, when you're in Bali, please interact and engage with Balinese people and ask them what their favorite types of food are and where they go to eat it. I think that is the best way to do it, because I often give people lists of all the places that I love to eat, but then I'll be talking to someone and they'll tell me about something completely different in a whole other part of the island. So I often say to people, in Bali we're always really excited to share our favorite foods and where to eat them. So ask around as much as possible. And then you may get an invitation to someone's house to come and have lunch.
I've never had one unpleasant interaction with a Balinese person. I'm not even just saying that. People are so excited when you tell them that you love Bali or you love their cooking.
Yeah.
It's really beautiful.
Well, so often, maybe not previously, many years ago, but nowadays people come and they have their plan of what they want to do, and they kind of don't want to be disturbed, and so maybe we share less now with people. But if you ask, everybody is so willing to share where to find the real stuff, because it's such a kind of, it makes us proud, to be able to share this,
especially if it's been overlooked as well, and something that people feel that is misunderstood or underrepresented.
Yeah, and I think it's really, it's having a moment now. There are a lot of people who are starting to go back to traditional cooking methods and using these ingredients that are endemic to here and returning to that. So visiting places that, you know, offer this kind of cuisine and this kind of cuisine culture will help encourage that going forward. So I mean, it's an answer that requires people to do a little bit of work, but I think it's really important because also once you start talking about the food culture, it will automatically shine a light on all these other parts of our very kind of intricately woven tapestry of life here, which has you know, so much wisdom and philosophy and thought embedded into it, and food is a lovely kind of entry point to learning about the rest of it, or at least understanding it on a deeper level.
I think it creates empathy as well, because it's sort of one of those things that is so universal. Everyone likes food.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
it's like, you know, it's such a beautiful bridge and sharing point. So yeah, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, it's been so lovely to speak to you. I've followed you for a while now, and I'm glad we could line this up when I was in Bali.
Me too.
So for people listening, how can they find you on social media? What's the best way to get in touch with you?
Yep. So my Instagram handle is Maya Kurtiasa. Pretty simple on Instagram. So yeah, get in touch there, and hopefully I'll share something interesting.
You do. I think you've got a website too. People can find the link for your book there.
Yes, website is still kind of under construction. But if you go to the Hardy Grant website, the publisher of the book, you can find it there. It's also on Amazon and in bookstores as well. So
beautiful. Congratulations on the book. I know it's been out for a while, but it's a really stunning book. I highly recommend it.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.